And I believe the AI transcription is on as well. Good morning, everyone. I am Jim Wentworth. I work at the Center for Innovation in Teaching and Learning, where I am the AI strategist. Today, I'm going to do a quick introduction to our Generative AI Fluency Certificate. So let me jump right in. So we started this as a pilot in the fall of last year and developed a number of modules. We started with these first 4 modules you see here and put this out as a pilot and got about 250 or so people moving through the modules. We ended up with 7 or 8 people that actually completed the certificate in the draft pilot version of this. And then we closed that out in the spring, and now we are launching kind of the revised full version of these modules based on the input we received. And so for anybody who's interested, you can go, I will throw in the chat. It is just go.illinois.edu/AI-fluency. That should get you to the page I'm on. And this is a open enrollment Canvas course, and this is meant to just be the course that describes the certificate overall and gets you access to the modules as they become available. Notice you can self-enroll in any of these, and I have a few that are just coming online very soon. We're in the final phases of getting these reviewed and ready to get out there, and so more to come very soon. And we have additional modules kind of in the works as well. So more, you will see this list continuing to grow. But this first course is really just the how do I get the certificate course? And some users will want to go through the entire certificate, but I will tell you, you can also just use each module individually. No reason to complete the certificate if you're not interested. Each module ends with a short quiz, and if you pass that quiz with at least 80%, you're awarded a badge for that module. To earn the certificate, you essentially complete 6 modules or some electives. So you don't have to just use our modules. You can also add in some of the other campus electives available, or even some of the commercial training out there. You can do these courses and do up to 2 electives. But the additional requirement for the certificate is to maintain a learning journal. So this is where you capture most of your reflections and where we can kind of review the links you've captured, review the threads you've engaged with AI. And so this is kind of what we grade for the certificate is the learning journal that each certificate awardee will complete. So all of that is described here on this homepage. I'm going to jump into student view just to clear up the menu. All we have here is the frequently asked questions about the certificate. This is the transparency statement of how AI was used to develop the modules. And here is how you submit your learning journal. So really, this is just the container. I can self-enroll in this certificate course right here. That will give me access, but it's always open at that URL I've given you. And then when you're ready to jump in, it's just a quick self-enroll in one of these. Go to the course. And here's an example of what the modules look like. Most of them follow this very similar pattern, although as we get to the more advanced topics, we are maybe adding a little bit more dense reading, a little less interaction on some of the more theoretical topics. Most modules look about like this. There's an introduction with the key topics that are covered. Learning objectives are listed well. It gives you the module requirements and the certificate. There's a little activity, and this progress bar is how you can move through the course. I'm gonna, some activities I have to mark as done. Again, these are set up for any audience really. So one of the uses for these might be requiring your students to complete 1 or 2 of these modules, and they can produce the badge at the end to show that they've at least understood enough to pass the quiz. But these are fairly in-depth. This one is understanding generative AI, what starts with a little bit of history. It gets into what is the difference between a rule-based system and kind of machine learning and what we get with large language models. So you kind of see the overall layout here. There's small little activities. And at least in the earlier modules, we're providing both the content in a read format for those folks who would prefer. You can also jump over and watch a video that's pretty much the same content. So all of the modules follow this same setup. It's one long module and then a quiz at the end that when I complete it, I can then claim my badge. Going to jump back and talk about the 5 modules we currently have available. So generative AI is probably the one that's most geared towards students, although if you're new to AI, it's a great place to start. Instead of a quiz, this one asks you to complete a responsible AI use statement that you could also turn into a faculty member who's asking you to complete this module. So it asks you to walk through the considerations of what you need to think about to use AI responsibly, and then generate your own AI responsible use document. It's the only one that uses that instead of a quiz. When you get to understanding generative AI, it's a little bit more about the mechanics of generative AI. It gets started with prompting, a little bit of the history of where AI came from. And then the collaboration using generative AI as a collaborator really gets into how you partner with these tools in more sophisticated ways to get more predictable results. There are lots of prompt patterns and techniques you can use to kind of improve your interactions with these tools. And a little bit more advanced even is designing AI interactions for consistency. This starts to get into topics like designing AI agents, why you might use an agent, what project folders allow you to do, group chats, all of the collaborative tools, things like that, but also the custom settings and how important it is to understand the settings behind the scene and how they're impacting the output you're getting. And then the other one available right now is engaging with multimodal AI, which will just allow you to explore a lot of different tools to create images, play with audio, video creation. If you've never done any multimodal, it's a great way to get started, just very simple, low risk, jump in and start making things. The one that's about to launch, like any day, I think we're ready to launch this cognitive impacts of generative AI. So I will make that available. I'll make sure all the folks who are listening in for the summer studio know that that's available. But we will advertise these as they come online. And this using generative AI to enhance learning will be valuable both for faculty and students. I think we will give targeted strategies for students to use AI in ways that improve their learning rather than kind of go down the cognitive decline path. And then the 8th one currently in the works, or our 8th module, is using and creating custom agents. This one's very much geared towards creating a custom GPT using ChatGPT. It goes into the benefits, but also kind of the risks and disadvantages of creating something that ends up being a very standardized kind of output. Our next phase, or where we're headed from here with this certificate, is to encourage other voices to start sharing through this platform. And so we have some folks working on, I believe I have a module on writing with and without AI in the works, perhaps another one on environmentally responsible AI use. But we are opening up to authors who are interested in collaborating. We heard from Mary Tunn yesterday, and she mentioned that their modules will also kind of be packaged here with this certificate program. That's the next phase of this is what other voices can we bring in? What else does campus want to hear about? I should say most of these modules are geared to be about an hour, but the activities push them more towards an hour and a half. In some cases, maybe as much as 2 hours if you really get into doing every activity inside of these modules. Some of them, like engaging with multimodal, has a lot of content there. I'm going to stop for a moment and see if there's any questions. Anybody? The next thing then I'm going to want to show you, let me rearrange my Zoom panels real quick. is right now these modules are all
Hello,
in our
hello.
Illinois Canvas instance, and so you can self-enroll as long as you have a net ID. But they're not available to anybody outside of our campus yet, and so I am
Hey,
working
Jim.
on moving them over. I'm sorry, was
Jim?
there a question?
Yes, there is a question.
Yes.
Oh, maybe.
So I'm just trying to get us, this is Patricia. I'm just trying to get a sense of how long these modules have been available and who has been doing them and whether there's like a large crowd on campus who's completed these modules, or what's your sort of sense of the percent of faculty and staff who have engaged with this?
Yeah, well, we opened them in the fall as a pilot and marketed them as a pilot opportunity, and I think 260 people self-enrolled in the certificate module. At that time, they were all packaged as one, so all of these were in one Canvas course, and so they had access to everything. Um, a good number of people moved through, more than 50% of the modules. I think only 8 people took the time to complete the entire certificate in its pilot format before we kind of closed that out in April. Um, and overall, really, the data is just it's pretty much pretty simple data on is this effective? Do you like this or not? Is this useful to you? And so the results were all really promising. People found the content good. There were organizational concerns, which is why we broke it into multi-modules. So it's much easier to find pieces now. But that's about all the info I have for you right now. Since I launched these latest version, it's been only maybe a month or 3 weeks, something like that. We've got about 80 people that have enrolled in this certificate course, this front page here, and about 90 or so in that have jumped into generative AI literacy. So you don't necessarily have to enroll in this course to enroll in literacy. And so those numbers are a little bit bigger. I think this one, the understanding is sitting at about 50 right now. So we're just getting started. But we also haven't really marketed these. This talk is one of the first times we're starting to promote the fact that these exist. Does that answer your question, or do you want more?
Check that button and it'll.
Yes, thanks a lot.
Yeah. For those, we're looking for other ways to make sure that these are useful for folks. So self-enrolling, pointing students to these is one way. For outside of our campus, we are starting to migrate these over to Canvas Catalog. So if you've never seen Canvas Catalog, I'll throw that in the chat real quick. Canvas Catalog is our list of kind of commercially available courses out there on the web, kind of like the MOOC platforms, right? Anyone can come in and purchase these courses. You don't need a net ID. If I go in and search my understanding generative AI, I hope will come up. And so right now we are pricing these at $15 per module. But the idea here is also that if we have partner institutions, like we have some folks coming to our campus from Columbia this summer, they need or would like access to these, but don't have net IDs. So this allows me to get people into these courses without a net ID. And if it's partner institutions like I'm talking about, we can give them a promo code so they can skip that $15 fee. They can get in and get access to this without having to wait on a net ID or paying anything. So that's the route we're building for the off-campus users. And then for faculty who might want to just grab a module and pull it into their course, I've now jumped over to the Canvas Commons. Let me show you that. This is our Canvas instance. On the left is this thing, bottom left, called the Commons. Oh, Mary showed us this yesterday too. I'm in student view, so I have to go get out of that real quick to get into the Commons. But yeah, Mary from the library showed us this module yesterday, AI in this course, a module from the library. This is one you can import directly into your own Canvas course and use. And we are also going to make some of the literacy modules available through this method as well. So this is the literacy one's the first one I'm testing. Right now, you could go and find this by searching it in the Commons and then downloading it from here. Let's click. I can download, or I think I can copy to my course. It's been a while since I've played with this. Get rid of all these windows, sorry. Zoom's in my way for a second. Oh, come on. Get back there. And so here is how I could import this into my course. And it gives you the same module structure and the files that exist in the other versions, including the responsible AI use statement assignment and the badge that is awarded once they submit that assignment. So I'm still testing this to make sure that the badge works through the Canvas catalog, but this would be I just want one of these modules imported into my own course kind of method or pathway. So 3 different ways. With the NetID, you just go in through AI-Fluency. If you're off campus and you are hoping to get in folks who don't have a NetID, we can look at how we can move these into, they will be in catalog here in the next month or so, all of them, and we can get promo codes and easy access for folks, or you can grab a module from the Commons. So that's pretty much what I want to demonstrate. Unless there's other questions, what else can I answer for you?
Where did you say that there was this AI fluency? Is that on Canvas?
They're self-enrolling Canvas things, I believe. We're linking to them from our CITL website.
There's 2 things. One from the university, but there is also one from the campus. You go to Common down here, you will find more.
Because you have iCanvas, right?
Yeah, we're starting to host them also in the Canvas Commons if you wanted to like also plug them into a course and offer them to students. But I believe they're linked off of our website to self-enroll.
I'm just gonna show you.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah. So if you go to Canvas and you go here to Common, you will request permission, but then you will get all these courses where you can embed it in your course.
Hello, Jim, can I ask a question?
Yes, there's some folks in the other room who are talking amongst themselves. Please go ahead.
This is Patricia again.
Yeah.
I was wondering about, and I know this is just getting started, but I was wondering about a question that Lila brought up yesterday about community. Is there a way to, say, create a community of people who, say, do the certificate or earn certain badges and try to create some space for people to come together? Because one of the problems that I think is emerging is that people sort of all feel isolated. And even though these modules are really great, they look really great and interesting and well done. I'm glad they're here. We still are in this mode of everybody learning in their own corner. So I was wondering if there's any discussion about, future community building based on these modules.
I think that's a great idea. We haven't discussed it specifically in relation to these modules, but definitely on the tour or at 3 p.m. today, we might bring you back down to the X3 studio if it's available. We might have a podcast going on, it sounds like. But that's the point of that room, kind of, is to start a physical place where we can have people starting to come to put hands on tools, but also a community space so we can start building more community. There has been in existence for some time a Teams channel around generative AI on campus that has maybe not nearly as many people in it as should be there. And that result is there's not much activity. And so we're trying to find what is the best way to build community on a campus like this. And it does feel like AI presents us with a great topic that people want to get together and discuss. And so, yeah, we're open to ideas of how we make that community happen. And yeah, CITL would be happy to host these things and to figure out how to bring folks together. And we do so somewhat through this AI Horizons program, but you really want to just get in a room and talk to colleagues more, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think it would be interesting to run just a show and tell session, or a come and talk kind of session out of the X3 space on a regular basis, and see if we can get people to show up both virtually and in person. Any
Jim, we
other
have an idea.
questions? Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, we do a cake of the month in that space every month.
Okay. Yep. Cake of the month.
Cake of the month. Yeah.
Very
Okay.
good. For those of you who are joining and not part of the summer studio program in 182, that's what we're hearing. Is there a group of people who are watching this collectively? I know there's at least a few of you who are probably logged in individually from other parts of campus. So I want to make sure that I'm addressing any questions from that group as well before we wrap up, and then I'm going to go join the folks in 182 as we move on with our program. Hopefully this is all pretty clear cut. I did see a hand. Please go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I have two related questions. So one is if we have faculty that we think might put in a couple hours but not complete the whole series, would you recommend they just work from top left to the right, to try to at least complete the first or second module? Is that how you would recommend it?
I guess I would recommend it as, if they feel like they're brand new, start at the top left. Yep. If they feel like they've been doing this a little bit, they might jump into the collaboration or the designing interactions for consistency. Those are definitely the intermediate. And I've been thinking about how to maybe add the beginner and intermediate banners to these, but I would think the first two, really getting acquainted. The next three right now are a little bit more intermediate level. And then when we get to the cognitive impacts, these others might actually be, no, not quite advanced, but definitely higher intermediate level, asking a little bit more work out of you.
Perfect, perfect. And then the second quick question was, is this really targeted at instructional faculty and staff, or is the series appropriate for really establishing literacy in any staff, even if they're not instructionally focused? So like if they were business staff or IT, or is it really tailored to the instructional mindset?
Right. There is the whole other training program going on through IHR that is doing an awful lot to support staff. And so I wouldn't say these are geared with staff examples. The examples of the prompts I'm using are probably geared towards students and faculty more than generalized, but it is intended, most of it is intended to be for a generalized audience. That said, I don't dig deep into the using Copilot in your workflows at work, those kinds of things. That is more handled by the IHR training.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions from the group? I appreciate everyone being here this morning. I am going to go ahead and stop sharing and log off here if there's nothing else. And I will see you all in the other room in a few minutes. Thank you all.
John? Yeah, Nick.